it is really wonderful to be here at the end of the season. And as we said at the beginning, we've taken some time as a community to examine some of the harmful theologies that have long been used to hurt and oppress us as queer and trans people. But tonight, we didn't want to end the season with a text of terror. Instead, we wanted to end with an affirmation of the goodness and the power and the hope that the prophet Isaiah promises to those of us who fall outside of the norm of gender binaries and whatever role that that society has been trying to assign to us.
That's right. So we wanted to start by emphasizing the very first line of tonight's passage, which opens with a command: maintain justice and do what is right. This is the invitation I hear in this season, the sacred resistance that is pride, because none of us are free until all of us are free. So we anchor ourselves in the work of justice, grounded in the courage of queer and trans people, especially Black, Brown, Indigenous, disabled, undocumented, poor and working class folks who have refused day in and day out to be erased.
We see in tonight's Isaiah text, we see an affirmation that God is less concerned about our gender, our sexuality, or our relationship structures, or how we choose to present ourselves, but instead, what God remains concerned with throughout, our biblical texts, and what remains our primary task as people of faith is to do what Anna just said, is to maintain justice and to do what is right, to care for the poor by building a society where all of our needs are met. With love and with concern. If we do that, then the Lord's salvation and deliverance will come to us.
So I've been deeply moved this Pride season by how this community has held space for each of us to say, I am here. I am whole. I am worthy. I am sacred. I am made in the divine image of God. And from that sacred knowing, we organize. We rise to ensure that all our siblings can live fully, that all our needs are met, and that justice rolls down like a mighty stream. And so I wanted to also bring in a little bit of the context of this passage, because I've been reading a book about abolition this week and thought it was helpful to bring that into this space. This passage was written after the Jewish community returned from exile in Babylon. Despite having just endured being cast out, they struggled to imagine a society that fully welcomed everyone. They returned to familiar systems, ones that excluded and marginalized others, whether that be foreigners or eunuchs. Folks were denied dignity. And so this reminds me how easy it is to fall back into old ways, especially when we aren't willing to abolish systems that no longer serve us. And so what happens when we fail to listen to the wisdom of all people, especially our queer and trans siblings who are daily pushing against the boundaries of gender, identity, and belonging? So I want to emphasize how our boldness reveals a path of possibility, breaking open the rigid constraints built by systems rooted in scarcity, exclusion, and hierarchy. So I love how we, as queer and trans people, are showing others and ourselves what a world shaped by abundance, creativity, and liberation looks like when we live fully into who we are unapologetically.
I want to take a second to just talk about in my own life what pride means to me, because I have never been able to separate what pride means to me from what being a part of this movement means to me, because being a part of this movement is what gave me the freedom to be myself, and it gave me a freedom that I didn't think was possible for a long time in my life. As folks may know, when I was 22 years old, I was a junior in college. I became a student fellow with the Poor People's Campaign, and that weekend was really transformational for many reasons. But one reason I don't share about as much is that weekend really helped me to come to terms with my gender. There was a specific night It was a Saturday night on the weekend, and we, as a student fellowship cohort, watched a screening of the documentary We Cried Justice. And afterwards, when this documentary ended, Reverend Erica Williams gave basically what was an impromptu sermon, as she does. But she basically, just tore down the room and was just telling us that no matter who we were, didn't matter, if we were white, if we were Black, if we were gay, if we were straight, if we were trans, every single one of us belonged in that room. And in this movement, no questions asked. And I remember something specifically about hearing a pastor say that. Something in that moment so clearly felt like a weight had just been catapulted off of my shoulders that I didn't even realize was there up until that point.
So pride too is about survival. It's about dignity. It's an invitation for the world to be porous, interconnected, and rooted in sacred relationships with each other, with Mother Earth, with all beings. It calls us to be joyful, free, and unbound by the forces that constrain our being. Isaiah's words echo powerfully today wherever the oppressed rise up, because this passage is a call into a movement where borders are broken and abundance is redistributed so that every need is met. And I love that this is the vision God offers us. When God introduces the eunuch, the gender non-conforming person of that time, it tells us something vital, that God's justice has always included those whose lives and bodies challenge binary thinking. As someone who embraces their non-binary identity, knowing that God offers me a name better than sons and daughters, an everlasting name, is a balm of good news for then and for now. So this pride, I'm holding onto God's holy interruption, God's refusal to let us gatekeep under systems that no longer serve life. God is crystal clear. Do not let the foreigner say, I do not belong. Do not let the eunuch say, I am just a dry tree. Many of us, especially our queers and trans people, know what it feels like to be treated as outsider, to be cut off from family, from tradition, from our communities of birth, to be told you don't belong because of who we are, how we love, or how we live. But it does not have to be this way. God does not want this for their children.
I've often spoken and said that there is my life before and after the Moral Fusion Student Fellowship training in Howard University. And I say that for a lot of reasons. Certainly that weekend did make me feel like I had come upon a political home that I never knew I was going to have. But there was also something a lot deeper. If you're trans, this is where you say it. Well, this is where my egg crack happened, and that's totally where my egg crack happened. But what that weekend meant to me is that a part of me that I had tried to keep quiet for so many years had been freed. And I know for a fact that had it not been for that movement and had it not been for that weekend, I think that part of me would be trapped inside of me for a really, really long time. Every once in a while, I look back at my documents from that night at the student fellowship from when we watched We Cry Justice. And I found the document that I wrote that night in the hotel room that kind of happened after all of this. And so I thought I would read a piece from it. And it says, yesterday, I stopped blaming myself for how I feel. The truth is, I know Jesus, and I've known Jesus for a long time in my heart. And I kept waking away from Jesus because so many kept telling me that Jesus doesn't love people like me. But I kept coming back to them because something in my heart told me that that's not the real Jesus. The real Jesus loves me. The Jesus that I know does not blame or shame. The Jesus that I know loves and helps. And I need to be here today because I need to show myself the love, respect, and dignity that I have fooled myself for the past 21 years to believe that I did not deserve. I hope for a country where there is not a fear that I hold in my heart every single day that I have my own life to lose because of who I am. I'm determined to shift something because it is wrong. It is just wrong. And I do think this shift starts with me. It starts with those in my life, showing them who I am, because I'll be honest, They're either with me or they're not. This fight is bigger than them, and it's bigger than me. There's no time to be silent anymore. This is about life or death. The work starts now, and I feel scared because I care. I think from that weekend on, I knew that I owed my heart and my head to this movement because my pride came and will continue to come from a freedom that I found of not being by myself, but what came from being a part of a movement that was fighting for every single one of us. My freedom came from being a part of a movement that said and acted and showed up that every single one of us had the capability to be leaders of justice, of hope, and of liberation in these dark times, including myself. My own freedom, and I know that the freedom of many out there can come from knowing that this is a place where we can show up to be as we are, and this is a place where we will be celebrated and where we will be loved and lifted up as deeply valuable and powerful leaders and people.
And so Isaiah is telling us something. The same God who hears the cries of the exiled hears the voice of our queer and trans siblings. The same divine breath that brought creation into being calls us by name, calls us to belong, and calls us to act in this world. We are called to co-create a world where no one is cut off, where all are named, all are known, all are held. A world and a house that we build together that holds radical acceptance, our interdependence, solidarity, that is a sanctuary of justice that brings forth shelter and healthcare and belonging for absolutely all. For trans lives, for migrant lives, for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and disabled lives, for all who are poor and dispossessed, and who have been told that they don't belong. This is what I hear in Isaiah. This is what I hear in Pride. A living, breathing movement of justice, of love, of radical belonging, a celebration of the sacred gifts in all of us. So, may it be so. Amen.